West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The Justice Department's investigation of the January 6th Capitol riot, now saying the evidence supports charges of sedition. In a 60 Minutes interview that aired last night, Michael Sherwin, the interim U.S. attorney who stepped down from the investigation on Friday, was asked why more people weren't being charged with sedition and whether prosecutors are looking into former President Trump's role in the riot. Take a look.
It seems like a very low bar, and I wonder why you're not charging that now.
Okay, so I don't think it's a low bar, Scott, but I will tell you this. I personally believe the evidence is trending towards that and probably meets those elements.
Do you anticipate sedition charges against some of these suspects?
I believe the facts do support those charges, and I think that as we go forward, more facts will support that, Scott.
Has the role of former President Trump been part of your investigation?
Well, we have soccer moms from Ohio that were arrested saying, well, I did this because my president said I had to take back our house. That moves the needle towards that direction. Maybe the president is culpable for those actions, but also you see in the public record too, militia members saying, you know what, we did this because Trump just talks a big game. He's just all talk. We did what he wouldn't do.
In short, you have investigators looking into the president's role.
We have people looking at everything.
Sherwin has resumed his position as federal prosecutor in Miami. Meanwhile, the New York Times yesterday released a report using D.C. police radio communications synchronized with footage at the scene showing the real-time struggle of officers trying to protect the Capitol on January 6th.
We're not here for you! We're here for America!
The Capitol Police Force requests backup. These internal radio communications are from the reinforcements, officers from D.C.'s Municipal Police Force, or MPD, who are called in to help the Capitol Police.
Cruiser 50, 64, 54, mount up.
Cruiser 50 is the call sign for the leader of the MPD response, Inspector Robert Glover, a high-ranking MPD veteran who specializes in crowd control and high-stakes confrontations. Over the next 76 minutes, the MPD radio communications, synchronized with footage from the scene analyzed by the New York Times, reveal the gauntlet Glover and his team face, trying to hold the line at the Capitol.
Multiple capital injuries! Multiple capital injuries!
It's been 5 minutes since Glover's team arrived, and already he's calling in officer injuries. He hears from other police on the radio who warn that the situation is about to get even worse.
Be advised the speech ended.
Now that President Trump has left the stage at the other end of the National Mall, crowds of people are streaming toward the Capitol.
Intel, be advised you got a group of about 50 charging up the hill on the left front.
Glover is still asking for the munitions unit.
150, give me DSO up here now! DSO!
Injuries are mounting.
Multiple law enforcement entry! DSO, get up here!
Police escalate their response and start using more crowd control weapons.
They're shooting into their own people! We represent blue lives and this is what they do to us!
Multiple deployments by Capitol MPD!
Let's bring in New York Times reporter and MSNBC national security analyst Michael Schmidt, who contributed to this real-time look at what officers were going through that day trying to protect the Capitol on January the 6th. Mike, as you pieced all this together, what did you learn?
I think the most important thing about Hold the Line, about what it was like to be on the front lines of this fight, is the sustained nature of this. Most interactions, most violent interactions that officers have happen pretty quickly. They happen over a matter of seconds. Sometimes they happen over a matter of minutes. Sometimes there's an extended version of that. But officers rarely confront hand-to-hand combat like soldiers over hours and hours. And the fact that these officers were thrust into this situation is just such an unusual challenge to them. It's just so different than anything they have had to experience before. And in that trauma, the fact that it went on so long is one of the reasons that you've had so many injuries, why you had so many severe injuries, things that we usually do not see officers having to experience in normal day-to-day American policing. And to be able to see through the eyes of these officers that were there trying to hold the line, and what happens when the line is breached and they eventually have to retreat. And certainly, obviously, this knocks out any of these conspiratorial notions that have been pushed about the fact that these Trump supporters were not violent and such. I mean, these ridiculous claims. But unfortunately, we live in this society where showing this video is just so important to the bare bone facts of what went on.
It is the 22nd of March of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. Oh, did we have a weekend? For those of you who reached out on Twitter and gave me some of that emotional support that one always needs when you're being spammed by thousands of anti-Asian racists. And shall I say, well, just the general maggot. And they might even be Russian troll bots for all I know, most of them. But, thank you for reaching out and giving me that emotional support. It was, it was nice. I needed it. Yeah, there sure are apparently a lot of racists out there upset that, we're making a big deal about anti-Asian hate. We don't want that. And for some reason, they always think this is the time they're going to take away our guns. It's just so ludicrous. It's laughable. And, of course, they think they know everything about the Second Amendment. Which is funny because they knew nothing about where America First came from. After 4 years of hearing America First, this, to many in my timeline right now this morning, they've been unaware that America First was a Nazi sympathizing group who had Lindbergh speaking for them, who was more than a Nazi sympathizer. I'm sorry he flew the Spirit of St. Louis, and he did that. How heroic is that? It's heroic, but he was still a Nazi. Let's not forget that, okay? and worked to pretty much undermine the United States of America. America first. Well, no, it just meant that America was first to fall. But apparently, the Second Amendment constitutional scholars never heard that America first were Nazis. Nazi sympathizers at best. What was funny is that one retorted, "Oh, you had to go all the way back to the 30s to find some Nazis." Well, yeah, that's where they came from. Actually, the 20s, but still. What idiots. I think their homeschooling failed them, except a lot of them are boomers like me. Well, they're former military. I'm not. Okay, I'm sorry. No decent military would have me. Yeah, there was a small moment of weakness where I went to the recruiter, but unfortunately my sports injuries, or fortunately I should say, my sports injuries kept me from being, even part of the Signal Corps. I don't know why. Well, you have to be able to pass the physical, and since I couldn't play football anymore, I guess I couldn't fight on a battlefield either. Well, there you go. Anyway, I respect the service of those who served our country. What's upsetting is how many former military are, calling for sedition. Right out in the open for the FBI to see. And I should mention, Sue in Rockville reminded me that just tagging the FBI at FBI, they're not going to see any of that. Actually got to report it. So it needs to be reported to Twitter or the social media platform. I don't think it was going to work with Zuckerberg. He likes that stuff. Jeez. Anyway, report it to Twitter. And then there's a online tip line that the FBI has set up, and report it there, because I don't know. These people are damn scary. They're perfectly brave to have all these gun memes. Yeah. Threaten gay rape, all this stuff, but somehow, I'm the bully for bringing up that, this whole thing is about anti-Asian hate. We need to stop the racism against Asians. And what comes out of their mouths? This is my gun. Try to take it from me. What? You mean you want a constitutional right to threaten Asians? Is this your argument? And they can't be racist either. That's the first one. Okay, well, that was, I spent far too much time on Saturday, dealing with these people. And I'm not one to block, but I just had to because I couldn't find my friends on my timeline. They spammed the hell out of me. It was an assault. Yeah, I was assaulted. Well, I didn't feel that threatened. What? Well, I've never really felt threatened. Yeah, I have. Oh, yeah, I brought up when I was drilling water wells in Latin America for a NGO, subcontracting to an NGO. And, it happened to be UNICEF. And UNESCO got in the midst of it at one point, too, but it was mostly UNICEF. And some paramilitaries came by to, basically show their force, because they knew there were some Americans there. And I got to tell you, you kind of put up with that quite a bit. You also, in some ways, felt that maybe the paramilitaries were on your side. But on the other hand, we were working for UNICEF and sometimes UNESCO, which weren't necessarily looked upon favorably by the School of America taught paramilitaries that were roaming the area. So, yeah, they were coming by to, rattle their sabers, essentially. Show you that they're around. So, yeah, I stared them down. I didn't make them go away, but I wasn't going to run or take a knee in being a supplicant to them. I mean, after all, we're Americans, right? Jesus. Well, did I get dragged for that? I didn't even bring up when Flora and I went to Sarajevo on an aid mission. And there were still mortars being fired into the market then. So, that was pretty scary. I saw some pretty weird stuff there. But I got to say, mortars up on the mountain ridge outside of town, that was pretty scary. But, it wasn't the same as seeing a fixed bayonet on a military-grade rifle or military-grade weapon that these paramilitaries in Honduras were carrying. And the marketplace was not really close to where we were at, and there weren't that many mortars that had fired, by the time we got there. But I didn't bring that up, jeez. Or how many times I got to walk the carpet in cans with Flora. Jeez. Anyway, what do they know? I wasn't going to give them a litany of apparently all the things that they don't believe I've done. Okay, you can look it up. I'm not purporting to be any major celebrity, but I've done a few things. I published here and there. I was on the on KUSF for, over almost 15 years. So, it's no small thing. It takes dedication to show up there all the time, huh? And that was in the midst of also being a professional chef and going on TV and chefing little cooking shows on TV. Jeez. Let alone my small foray into rock and roll as a business, trying to make money. We failed at the Troubadour, but hey, we made it to the Troubadour and beyond. We played bigger venues than the Troubadour. We were on a little stadium tour with the Doobie Brothers because our manager and their manager were pretty tight. So we were one of the opening acts for, half a dozen shows with the Doobie Brothers. That was heady stuff for a 19-year-old, but I'm not going to, I'm going to tell them that. They want you to jump through hoops. They want to debate you. Don't debate them. It's not about debate. I just call them racists. You're a racist. You're a racist gun nut. If you're so activated by the brutal murder of cold-blooded murder of a white nationalist Bible-thumping goon killing Asian women specifically. That's what he was there for. Yeah, I got to see the two pictures of, the non-Asian people that got killed. Oh, well, they were in the crossfire. They were customers. Give me a break. Also, the sex worker trope. I'm trying to wrap my head, once again, I'm going to repeat this. You may have heard this on Tim Corrimal's show previously. And you might hear it again later on today. I'm still trying to wrap my head around a 75-year-old sex worker. Give me a break. A woman was there getting a pedicure, a manicure, and a facial. She was getting the spa treatment. But we're going to dehumanize these women because, they must have been sex workers. Look, they're Asian. Everybody knows that the Asian manicure place is a front for something we don't know what. Something unscrupulous. Yes. So the evil Asian woman deserved it probably. And that's what a lot of people think. Why else did the perp? I still maintain the perp got a Whopper with cheese before they took him to the jailhouse. That's what they do. And that guy that's no longer apparently part of the police force that stood up there and said, he was just having a bad day. Yeah, some people are saying he was just repeating what the kid said. Well, I brought up the fact that the Korean language press has reportage of survivors saying the guy came in yelling, "Kill all the Asians." And of course, that's dismissed because they're Korean. So you're going to dismiss the Korean community, but believe the white nationalists that killed them? Uh-huh. Well, we have a story later on about, shall we say, the bias within the thin blue line. Indeed. Well, with that stated, what else is on the rest of the menu here as we start off in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? River City Hash Mondays at the top. Yeah. That was a 60-minute breakdown on Joe and Mika this morning. about how DOJ investigators have found evidence to charge sedition in the U.S. Capitol assault on January 6, and it looks like it will ensnare Donald Trump. Charged with sedition. I know everybody's going to, on the right wing, will say, you're just a banana republic. Blah, 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 blah. Well, how many years do we have to hear lock her up? If you guys had gotten your hands on Hillary Clinton, you would have strung her up on the gallows outside the Capitol. And you know it. That's why you're being charged with sedition. And the guy that, well, triggered you is going to get, well, I don't know. We'll see. But apparently they have enough evidence to charge. On the rest of the menu, Idaho lawmakers have recessed until April 6 amid an out-of-control COVID outbreak. I know that's redundant, but I had to put it in. The religious right is spreading horrific disinformation on social media to kill the Equality Act. And that's because they don't believe in equality. Why would they? And Pennsylvania cops' post to a private Facebook group reveals dangerous levels of hostility, hate, racism, misogyny, and insubordination. I think we need to purge law enforcement and the military of a, well, shall we say, certain mindset. After the break, we move to the chef's table where police officers who fled the coup in Myanmar, after defying orders to shoot protesters, have pleaded with India to grant them asylum status. And renowned Egyptian feminist, psychiatrist, and novelist Nawal Saadawi has died at age 89. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Casey Quinlan of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The religious right is using Facebook ads to disseminate misinformation about the Equality Act that could reach millions of people. The act, federal legislation that would prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity in areas including public accommodations and facilities, education, federal funding, employment, housing, credit, and the jury system, passed the House of Representatives on February 25th and is now up for consideration in the Senate. Facebook allowed anti-LGBTQ groups to run at least 8 ads that included links to websites that spread lies and distortions about what the Equality Act does ahead of a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on the bill on March 17th. Now, information on the sites linked to the ads presents a nation in which the Equality Act passes as devoid of free religious expression and full of public schools that force a specific curriculum on students, which experts on LGBTQ non-discrimination protections say nothing in the bill provides for. The ads also associate transgender people with acts of sexual violence, a tactic that has a long history of being deployed by the religious right against, queers. I should mention that if you wanted to find, some sexual deviancy, pedophilia and all that, you need go no further than the evangelical right-wing church. The Family Policy Alliance, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and the Illinois Family Institute are the groups behind the ads. Last year, prominent anti-LGBTQ figures previewed what was to come when they made outrageous claims in November about what Joe Biden would do if he were elected president. On Election Day, evangelical leader Franklin Graham talked about the Obama administration's so-called gay-lesbian agenda and said, "I think if the Democratic Party wins again, they'll be right back with that agenda, and they'll be looking for businesses and ministries to target and to shut them out of business or even put them in jail. Who knows? But it's coming." These people crack me up. You know, the Second Amendment racist gun nuts that attacked me or, came after me over the weekend. You mentioned just a simple thing like, it would be nice to have a gun safe so a kid doesn't shoot himself in the head. They think you're going to send in SWAT and violently take their guns away and kill them in their sleep. Probably black people are going to kill them in their sleep, so they have to have all these guns. Finally, after everything that they've done to us, this is the time we're going to go and kill them in their sleep. Please. These people conflate everything because victimhood is a terrible drug. Seems like I got a little bit out of order and read our second offering before the first. So why don't we go ahead and catch up by reading this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it comes out of Reuters by Reuters staff. The Idaho State Legislature has recessed until April 6 due to a COVID-19 outbreak at the state capitol that has sidelined 6 lawmakers with the virus so far. 6 members of the Idaho House of Representatives are currently ill, and members of both chambers of the Republican-held state legislature voted to recess in proceedings on Friday, at which several lawmakers were not wearing face masks, video showed. I'm sure I can say this on behalf of all of us that we wish our colleagues in the House who are ill with COVID a speedy recovery, State Senator Grant Burgoyne, a Democrat, said in the session on Friday. New daily COVID-19 cases in Idaho have fallen to about 320 on a 7-day average as of March 15th. That is down from a surge in December when the state was reporting more than 1,000 new cases daily. At the Idaho State Capitol earlier this month, protesters burned face masks to show their disagreement with local face covering mandates that they view as a violation of civil liberties. Yeah, forget about your neighbor. Yeah. Okay, I know all about your civil liberties. The state's Republican Lieutenant Governor, Janice McGeachin, attended the event at the Capitol, and at least 2 Republican legislators expressed their support for the Burn the Mask rallies, and now they've had to shut down the legislature because those people brought in the virus and got everybody sick. 6 so far. With 7 so far to add on to the 6 already sick. The state Democratic Party blamed this Capitol's outbreak on Republicans' refusal to wear masks. Let's be clear. The Republicans and the Republican leadership refuse to wear masks. That is why this is happening. Period. Recessing won't stop the spread. Masks will, the Idaho Democratic Party tweeted on Friday. State Senate Majority Leader Kelly Anthon and Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeachin did not immediately return requests for comment. Claudia Lauer and Thalia Beatty of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. In a private Facebook group called the Pittsburgh Area Police Break Room, many current and retired officers spent the year criticizing chiefs who took a knee or officers who marched with Black Lives Matter protesters, whom they called terrorists or thugs. They made transphobic posts and bullied members who supported anti-police brutality protesters or Joe Biden in a forum billed as a place officers can decompress, rant, and share ideas. Many of the deluge of daily posts were jokes about the hardships of being officers, memorials to deceased colleagues, or conversations about training and equipment. But with the posts that shifted toward pro-Donald Trump memes and harsh criticism of anyone perceived to support so-called Democrats, Black Lives Matter, or coronavirus safety measures. In June, Tom Hushak, a corporal at the Borough of Lincoln Police Department, posted a screenshot of an Allegheny County 911 dispatcher's Facebook page indicating that the phrase Blue Lives Matter used by law enforcement supporters is not equivalent to the slogan Black Lives Matter because policing is a choice, not a fact of birth. He wrote many negative posts on police and we should trust her with our lives. Some angry members rallied quickly and organized phone calls to her supervisor demanding she be fired. Multiple officers called and reported it. Remember, no justice, no peace, West Mifflin Borough Police Department Officer Tommy Trio responded under his Facebook name, Tommy Bear. A few members of the group also were bullied or left the page, including an officer who said the Fraternal Order of Police's Trump endorsement did not represent her, and a black officer who was accused of creating a fake Facebook account to complain about the lack of diversity in local departments. The AP was able to view posts and comments from the group, which has 2,200 members, including a dozen current or former police chiefs. More to come on that story, eh? Well, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Lady Sings the Truth. Despite her 20th century fame, not a lot is known about Billie Holiday's real backstory. Indeed, when asked about claims in her own autobiography, she said, "I never read that book." Lee Daniels, The United States versus Billie Holiday, may not get everything right, but it is on point concerning the unceasing FBI harassment she endured literally to her deathbed. It's debatable that they were motivated by her anti-lynching anthem, Strange Fruit, as posited here, but from what is known of J. Edgar Hoover, it can't be ruled out. Holiday, as portrayed here, is the epitome of a tortured artist. Despite possessing an amazing voice and loads of charisma, Holiday struggled with drug addiction, toxic partners, and bad decisions. Despite her faults, though, the racial and political targeting she endured was untoward. Racist FBI agent Harry Anslinger, a holdover from Prohibition, targets her under the guise of the war on drugs and the additional pretext of the Strange Fruit song. Adding to the plot is a black undercover FBI agent who befriends Holiday but ultimately betrays her. Watching this one, the thought occurs that at the writing stage, the producers may not have known what they had in their untested lead, Andra Day. She's an R&B singer not only with singing chops but with acting ability, portraying going from glamorous to strung out in a way that belies her experience. Known earlier, a better movie may have emerged, with more emphasis on Holiday's life and art and less on the politics. The recent Judas and the Black Messiah kinda just went there. Day is the real reason to watch this, and she's already won the Best Actress Golden Globe. The United States versus Billie Holiday likely takes the liberties many biopics do. Nonetheless, it's worth a watch. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a new Scientific American podcast series.
This is your Fast Track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research, and we help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
And I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, after a whole awful year of COVID, we're going to talk about what we did wrong and what we've learned to do right.
We'll also be correcting an idea that the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine is second-rate.
And giving you news about some recent developments in COVID medicines.
This is not a celebration kind of anniversary, but we're at the one-year milestone of the pandemic.
This week is the one-year anniversary of when the World Health Organization first called COVID a pandemic. This time last year, the world was going into lockdowns, borders were closing, and cities became ghost towns. Now we've lost more than 2.6 million people worldwide to this awful disease, including more than 500,000 in the US alone. I wrote a story about some of the biggest mistakes in the US pandemic response, from not taking the virus seriously, to confusing or inaccurate mask guidance, to failing to protect our most vulnerable people, whether it's the elderly, essential workers, or people of color. These mistakes cost us hundreds of thousands of lives.
It's been such a tragedy. Has it only been disaster after disaster?
Well, there were some successes, too. Healthcare workers really stepped up to help treat people the best they could. Everyday people took the initiative to help flatten the curve by staying home and wearing masks. And perhaps most impressive of all, several highly effective vaccines were developed in record time, and they all protect against severe disease and death. And now millions of Americans are getting vaccinated every day across the country. In fact, we're already seeing dramatic declines in the numbers of elderly people who are hospitalized and dying from COVID in the US, which is at least in part due to the vaccines. So I've been reporting on this topic of COVID now for a year and living through it like all of you. And I've learned a great deal about this virus and about how we respond to it. And I've tried to distill some of those lessons in a story about the pandemic, which is on scientificamerican.com if you want to read it. Speaking of vaccines, Josh, not everyone is totally excited about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. What's going on with that?
People are paying a lot of attention to one number from the vaccine trials, 23. Overall, the Moderna-Pfizer vaccines seem 23% more effective than the J&J one, which protects people at about 72%. So some people, like the mayor of Detroit last week, who at first passed on using J&J in his city, but then changed his mind, seem to think that J&J isn't as good. But here's why 23 is misleading. It's probably much smaller in real life. The first vaccines were tested early last year, when there wasn't a lot of virus around. The J&J vaccine was tested in late fall, when there was a lot. A lot means, naturally, more people get sick. If Pfizer and Moderna were tested now, more people in those tests would get exposed, and the vaccine would show a smaller improvement than 23. Plus, we know J&J works against some of the new virus variants because it was tested after they appeared. And J&J prevented 100% of hospitalizations and deaths, and 85% of severe illness. And that's what you want in a vaccine in the middle of a deadly pandemic, to keep you from needing an ambulance ride to the ICU.
What about drugs to treat you if you already have the disease? That's a different story, right? And sometimes a pretty frustrating one.
Yep. There are not a lot of approved drug options for COVID. It's been a year, and we've got the drug remdesivir and 2 forms of monoclonal antibodies that slow down the virus in your body. They work a bit, but the effects are not major. And there's the steroid dexamethasone, and that helps hospitalized patients who need oxygen or are on ventilators.
Well, that's disappointing. But do you know of anything new in the works?
Well, an NIH treatment panel recently approved another monoclonal antibody drug, tocilizumab, for hospitalized patients who are having real trouble breathing. The drug damps down inflammation. That's what's behind the breathing distress. But I talked with Lindsay Baden, an infectious disease doctor at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, who said that the drug only works on patients who also get dexamethasone. So you still need both. And he sounded a bit frustrated that there was not a clear benefit to the drug. Other researchers share this frustration. Some of them are calling on the Biden administration to start supporting medicine development the same way it supports vaccines. Biden did just sign an executive order telling the federal government to come up with a plan to test more medicines. That seems like a step in the right direction.
You are now up to speed. Thanks for joining us.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly, and check out SIAM.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. When laws or governmental actions conflict with a citizen's views of what is right and wrong, the citizen faces a difficult decision. In our system of government, you have a right to try to have laws changed. There are many ways that you and others can work to change laws that you think are unjust. Until you get them changed, however, you are held responsible for obeying the laws. But suppose a law requires you to do something you believe is wrong. Must you obey the law? Some people argue that since no government is perfect, a citizen's responsibility to obey the law has limits. In their view, if a law is unjust, the citizen has no responsibility to obey it. However, deciding to disobey the law has consequences that the citizen must be prepared to accept. Such consequences might include paying fines and even going to jail. Throughout history, many citizens have accepted the consequences of disobeying the law. For example, during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s, Martin Luther King Jr., Fred Shuttlesworth, Rosa Parks, and many others chose to go to jail to protest racial segregation laws. Their sacrifices spurred legislation that eventually dismantled segregation. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
In less than a year, COVID-19 has killed more than 500,000 people in the United States, more than the total number of American battlefield deaths in World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War combined. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence proclaimed that we were endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The founders then adapted that inspirational statement into the Constitution by providing in the Bill of Rights the guarantee that the federal government could not deny any person life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Then, after the Civil War, the 14th Amendment expanded and enshrined that promise, guaranteeing that no state shall deny any person due process or equal protection. But as COVID-19 stalks the land, it mocks the idea of due process and equal protection. Over 80% of the deaths are people 65 and older, and communities of color have suffered the most. The 500,000 COVID deaths demonstrate that public health and environmental justice are critical civil rights and civil liberties struggles of our time, and that there's not a moment to lose. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
When corporate executives are absurdly hypocritical, yet so obtuse that they don't even realize it, is it still hypocrisy, or are they just dim-witted? Consider the histrionics emanating from corporate bunkers over rising public approval for the idea that nature might be given legal rights that are enforceable in courts. The Rights of Nature movement argues that if, say, a mining conglomerate decapitates a mountain, that injured citizen of our natural world ought to have its day in court. Outrageous, shriek the honchos of corporate America. The courts are for people, not for pieces of property. Hello, hypocrisy. After all, a corporation is not a person. It has no brain, no pulse, no soul, no life. It's not even a real piece of property, just an inert document printed by a state. Yet, the owners of that piece of paper claim that it magically bestows personhood on their syndicate, giving it the legal and political rights of real people. Yet these paper people now cry that Earth's actual living creatures can't have any legal rights because they're just property. Excuse me, but a single drop of water has more life in it than all the corporations in the world. Also, let's note that the long evolution of law even had to be enlightened to recognize that such property as slaves were human beings with fundamental rights. The body of legal and moral rights has grown, and it enhances our own humanity to recognize that we and nature are one. Crass corporate exploitation, on the other hand, diminishes all living things, threatening life itself. This is Jim Hightower saying, those who mock the idea of legal standing for marshes, grasslands, forest networks, and other wildlife might consider taking a moment by a quiet stream in the woods to ponder the question, does nature need us, or do we need her?
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor. All for only $15 a year. To become a Lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day the Equal Rights Amendment passed the U.S. Senate and moved to the states for ratification. It had passed the House the previous fall. Alice Paul and Crystal Eastman of the National Women's Party first wrote the ERA in the 1920s. It was introduced to Congress in 1923. The revised version that Congress passed in 1971 and 1972 stated simply, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. The amendment needed 38 states to ratify by March of 1979 in order to pass. 35 states ratified the amendment, but 5 states later rescinded ratification. The 38-state requirement was never met. The decades-long debate among women's rights advocates often centered on formal equality versus protective legislation for women workers. But an amendment establishing equality meant the end to restrictive discriminatory laws. These included laws imposing restriction on a woman's right to buy or sell property or to conduct a business, the age at which women could marry, differing admission standards for boys and girls in tax-supported educational institutions, laws establishing different jail sentences by sex for identical crimes, regulations denying unemployment compensation payments to pregnant women who are still able and willing to work, and much more. The far right and religious fundamentalists of all faiths fiercely opposed the ERA, fearing it would erode traditional gender roles. Many progressives and the labor movement also opposed it for many years on the basis that hard-won protective legislation would be lost. It is striking that, as of 2017, there is still no clear legal codification of women's equal status to men.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Room at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy with occasional showers this afternoon, had a little bit of rain this morning, highs only in the low 50s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Overnight lows tonight will be in the mid to low 30s, partly to mostly cloudy. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, small chance of rain. Partly cloudy skies tomorrow, highs near 60, with winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And I don't think we'll have rain for another few days. Confirmed cases of coronavirus have not been updated from the weekend, though since late Friday, they now stand at 8,913, with confirmed deceased at 120. Pollen is still rated as none here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 33 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at 5. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.23 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles, and relative humidity is at 91%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by People's, a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 57 and sunny. Paris is 48 and cloudy. Rome is 57 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 38 with light snow. Kabul is 43 degrees with light rain. Hong Kong is 62 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 47 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 63 and raining. San Francisco, California is 45 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit and a springtime sunny day for you. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Anupam Nath of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Myanmar police officers who fled to India after they said they defied orders to shoot people protesting their country's military coup are urging India's government not to send them back and to grant them asylum on humanitarian grounds. One of the officers who has sought refuge in a village in the northeastern Indian state of Mizoram along the border with Myanmar said they did not want to return to their country until the problems are solved. That officer and others who spoke to the AP did so on condition that no one would tell anybody who they are out of concern for the safety of family members still in the country. Another officer who fled told AP that soldiers ordered them to arrest, beat, torture the protesters, and said police were always sent to the front whenever there was a protest. She said the officers had no choice but to leave Myanmar.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Nawal Saadawi, a renowned Egyptian feminist, psychiatrist, and novelist, whose writings have stirred controversy for decades in an overwhelming conservative society, died of age-related health problems in Cairo yesterday, Sunday. She was 89. Egyptian's culture minister Enes Abdel-Dayem mourned Saadawi's passing, saying her writings had created a great intellectual movement. Born in October of 1931 in a Nile Delta village just north of Cairo, Saadawi studied medicine in Cairo University and the Columbia University in New York. She worked as a psychiatrist and university lecturer and authored dozens of books. She was also a regular writer in Egyptian newspapers. As a fierce advocate of women's rights in Egypt and the Arab world, her writings focused mainly on feminism, domestic violence against women, and religious extremism. She was a vocal opponent of female genital mutilation in Egypt and worldwide. When she published her famous book, Woman and Sex, in 1972, she faced a storm of criticism and condemnation from Egypt's political and religious establishment. She also lost her job at the health ministry. She was detained and jailed for 2 months in 1981 as part of a wide political crackdown waged by then-President Anwar Sadat. While in jail, Saadawi wrote down her experience in a book entitled Memoirs from a Woman's Prison, using a roll of toilet paper and a cosmetic pencil. Rest in peace, great woman. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.